From NBC News, Ryan Routh found guilty in Trump golf course assassination attempt. Following this, he attempted to stab himself in the neck with a pen. They subdued him, and it is strange to me that they just have these weird courtroom drawings, which is from a time when cameras didn't exist. And I don't know why they don't allow cameras in these trials now, especially when it's a would-be assassin of Donald Trump. But once again, we are dealing with far-left extremism, and this is... These people are closer to mainstream Democrats than anyone wants to admit. The assassin of Charlie Kirk, the alleged assassin, he wasn't a guy who was found with a Karl Marx. They didn't find him with Das Kapital in his attaché case. He's a guy who had mainstream Democrat views that Charlie Kirk opposed, and the evidence suggests that's why he killed Charlie Kirk. When they go through these graphs and say the far right does more crime, there is no manifesto in the Republican Party supporting far right extremists. It doesn't exist. And so the left has to make it up because they are psychotic and insane. And once again, more proof.
This guy is a Ukraine extremist. I think he spent 10 months in Ukraine. And obviously, this is the other narrative the left have been pushing about Trump. Yes, he's fascist. Yes, he's tyrannical. Yes, he's authoritarian. But he's also Putin's puppet. He's also Putin's man. And Putin is the great enemy. Putin is the great Satan that we have to, attack. And he's America's number one enemy. So if he's controlling Trump, then obviously Trump is also that enemy. And it's interesting because Trump today actually tweeted about Ukraine, and I'm sure Ryan Routh would probably support Trump's tweet, supporting Zelensky, going against Putin, saying that Ukraine is able to win this war. And this idea, again, that Trump is somehow controlled by Putin was another complete false narrative pushed for over a decade, the kind of Russiagate stuff from 2015 and 2016 and so on, that again drives people totally crazy, totally radical, totally extremist. And the left, again, they're talking about this kind of words equals violence. Well, look at what this narrative that the left pushed that was completely false has led to. Someone trying to kill the president, and obviously today trying to kill himself after the guilty verdict.
Yeah, I mean, the whole Ryan Routh thing, I don't understand what the point of. I don't know that he was particularly suicidal. I haven't heard a lot about it beyond at least recently. But I don't know the idea that he was actually trying to kill himself. I'm not even sure that I really buy it. Obviously, You think
he's putting on a show?
Yeah. That's just my kind of gut instinct, and I'm
apparently
totally
he wasn't even defending himself. He had asked questions like, would you want to put on a rock festival with me?
Yeah, he didn't have a lawyer, did he?
No. And he didn't ask questions about the case. He was apparently asking gag questions, and they were just staring at him like he was nuts. And his principal argument was that he did prep the entire assassination and want to kill Trump, but decided not to do it.
This could be just an attention seeker. I mean, maybe that's why he attacked himself. But, this is all, he sees himself on the world stage. He knows people are watching,
I think the point was that he had failed in what his plan was, and so he's trying to make it seem like he's a loon because he doesn't want... I think the guy's actually rather smart, knows what he's doing, considering the sophisticated plan he had to try and kill Trump. The point is, if he seems lucid when he does this, then it is left ideology is a threat. If he acts crazy, liberals will go, that guy, he was trying to put on a rock festival. He wasn't even actually defending himself. He was clearly insane. He's just a mental health patient.
I wonder how much Ukraine actually came into it with him, because it seems the left they switch out their causes. Suddenly it's trans, then it's Ukraine, then it's BLM. Maybe this is just someone who's, again, hates Donald Trump and is using Ukraine as an excuse or some kind of, some theme of his left-wing radicalism. It seems they can just switch out any of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think Ukraine is kind of a telltale of radicalized MSNBC Americans. It's I said on the show yesterday. And this guy's just a textbook version of that. It's just a guy that his views are just a conglomeration of what Rachel Maddow said the previous evening. And it just culminates in this bizarre Ukraine glazing. And it doesn't take much. This guy just has to lose a little bit of things just to feel a little bit of instability in his life. He'll try and go kill the president.
Trump is now glazing Ukraine.
It's true.
He's saying, you know what, we can win this one and we need to go in. He's also, did he was talking about going back to Afghanistan too?
Yeah, he said he'd be open. Yeah, he just
maybe the bullet grazing his ear really, put the fear God in him.
Usually Trump will say the last thing that someone said to him before he goes into a public sphere. That happens quite often, because he also was like had a super base take at the UN today, where he was basically just lecturing Europe on like having open borders.
They were talking with the Taliban about actually getting Bagram back. So it's more than just Trump, spouting off. And then as for Ukraine, I imagine that has a lot, or the incursions by Russia into NATO airspace has a lot to do with it.
That's how it started. That's how it started. Is he had the gaggle going on at the side of the General Assembly, and a reporter asked, "Would you shoot down any jets over NATO airspace?" And he said, "Yeah, we should." And that's obviously sends a big warning shot over to Russia. So then he puts a message out on social media doubling down.
Was there a violation of airspace after he said that?
No, but I mean, it's only been a few hours.
This is before. So Russia, the drones violated Polish airspace, jets violated airspace over the Baltic and Estonian airspace.
Right.
And now Poland's saying they're going to shoot down any Russian aircraft that enters their airspace.
I mean, look,
Trump said he proves that.
Well, yeah. I mean, what else? Why wouldn't they?
Yeah,
it's a warning. Don't do it, Russia.
The idea that Russia, like the U.S., really, what should happen is the U.S. should put F-22s in Poland, and they should scramble them if Polish airspace is violated, and they should intercept them.
No. They should do. Those lasers they have. They do. I'm not kidding. They have these gigantic infrared lasers that can lock onto an aircraft and superheat it, causing it to malfunction and crash.
Well, I'm thinking before we get into actual combat with them, if you scramble F-22s and just say, okay, we're going to escort you out of here, because that's generally what's happened in the past. Like, because Russia has done that in the past over Alaska. That's why there's F-22s stationed in Alaska. So if Russia violates our airspace, they scramble F-22s and they escort them out.
We rotate F-22s through Eastern Europe all the time. We have huge bases in Lithuania.
So that's
this is an Israeli ship. The Helios system, 60 kilowatt directed energy weapon.
And I mean, that's all cool and stuff, but I think that it would be kind of sick if they're gonna take them out. It would be sick if F-22 shot them down.
Well, don't you think the Poles should look after their own airspace? I mean, this is what a lot of the MAGA people have saying for years: is that Europe needs to pay for its own defense, and they shouldn't be relying on these American aircraft to do that. Poland is actually spending 5% of its GDP on its military. It's like one of the only countries in Europe doing that, and they're taking it really, really seriously. And there are other European countries who are starting to invest a bit more in their defense, and that's been one of Trump's foreign policy goals for decades, or over a decade. Yeah. So I think, and that's what he said today about Ukraine and winning the war is we'll supply the weapons to NATO. NATO can do whatever they like with them, and we think the Europeans should be paying more for their own defense and more for the war in Ukraine because it's on their border, obviously, right? Yeah. And Trump being in the UN today, I don't know if you've mentioned this already, but the escalator thing, where they turn off the...
We'll get to that.
Okay, we'll get on to that. Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I did see a few people speculating that this is actually Trump. There's two things happening here. Is one, he's trying to maintain this position of strength over Russia, right? Like they still are a global adversary. So he can't just say, okay, that's totally fine if you want to scramble aircraft over Eastern Europe. So he has to negotiate from a position of strength here. And then B, you're hitting on it, a few people were speculating this, is he's also trying to reward Poland for really pulling their weight in NATO, because you got to make an example out of these countries that are just hanging on in NATO. They'll give the 1-2%. I think Spain Germany. Is 2%. It's what are we doing here? So yeah, that could be, but the first one is absolutely what's happening. This is how it's been. Are you new around here? This is how Trump negotiates. He goes big, he goes bold, he's bombastic, he's chauvinistic. That's how he operates. So it's don't panic, let him cook a little bit. We have to we can't not negotiate from a position of strength. This is foreign policy 101. So.
Yeah, I think that it makes perfect sense for the U.S. to kind of turn up the heat on Russia at this point.
Well, here we go.
I mean, it's true. I'm not a hawk, but at the end of the day, I've been saying, I don't think that Russia's going to actually make a move on Poland if they were to take Ukraine. And if Putin is signaling that that's not the case, that he actually might, which I don't know what else violating NATO airspace is intended to do. It's other because than they want Trump to see what he would actually do.
They want to track the weapons that NATO is sending into Ukraine. Yeah. And so there's no reality when Russia's getting sanctioned and getting battered down that they're not going to be we need to cut off the flow of weapons. Well, it's not going to stop because NATO's supplying them. We need to see where they're coming from. If Russia gets access to intelligence in NATO countries of where the weapons are flowing, they'll know where they arrive in Ukraine. And I think that's what Russia's motivation is in sending in the drones. It's surveillance. And NATO is nah, dem's not the rules. You do not do that. And I think I think Putin thought he could get away with a couple of them, and now he backs off.
Putin is just trying to provoke, though. I mean, Russia has been doing this for many years, trying to violate Western airspace. I think they did this in Britain a couple of years ago, where they're flying in their aircraft nearby or sending in submarines in the North Sea. The Russians are just testing the waters. They want to see how far they can get. And this is what Putin was doing before he actually launched the war in Ukraine. He was sort of slowly seeing what the Western response would be and sort of testing our strengths, testing our weaknesses, and then going in where he saw the weakness. He actually calculated Ukraine completely wrong, by the way. I mean, he thought that he would be able to take over the country in a few days, remove the political leadership.
That's not true. That was a political statement, I think, made by Boris Johnson.
I don't like Boris Johnson for a million different reasons. I disagree with him actually on almost everything. On this, I think he's right. From the Western intelligence, Putin obviously would not send in this huge column of tanks and armored troops and people who were so easily attacked by the Ukrainians, then withdraw from northern Ukraine in a humiliating fashion.
Yeah, he would.
No, you really think so? You really think
because
that's 4D
because he wanted.
It's so humiliating.
It's not 4D chess. It's he attacks from the north and from the east so that he can secure a land bridge into Crimea, where they have the Black Sea Fleet and access to the Black Sea, which allows them to transport oil to North Africa and through the Suez to get towards India and other countries. That's the control that he wanted, and he got it. So if you look at how this started and where we ended up, every move that Russia made allowed them to secure the land bridge into Crimea.
I think that's definitely one of his geopolitical goals. But I think overall, at the beginning of the war, he was told by his generals and the people around him that this would be a country. Ukraine is basically pro-Russia, and the people will support you when they go and attack.
This is too much comic book villainy for me, bro. I was when I was in Ukraine in 2013 and 14, the almost entirety of Kiev was pro-EU. It was the eastern regions that were more Russian, but Kiev was very, very pro-EU. That's what the Euromaidan protest was.
Sure.
So the idea that Putin did not know that and was like, but my advisors said they would support me, we'd be greeted as liberators, is silly.
Dictators, this is what happens with dictators. Stalin, Napoleon,
George W. Bush.
After decades in power, they're surrounded by yes men. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to... We don't know. Look, no one knows really what happened.
Well, right.
I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that Putin is surrounded by people giving him false intelligence, because going into Ukraine in that bizarre fashion, as I said, getting attacked on all sides from these Ukrainian and Western drones.
But again, you said
all these
bizarre.
people dying. You don't think that's bizarre?
No, he won the land bridge. The whole fight has been around securing Crimea, because that's where the Sevastopol fleet, the Black Sea Fleet for Russia, is, and this is their only warm water port. Now, some have argued that they could rebuild in, like, I don't know, near Georgia or whatever. They have other access to the Black Sea, and it's like, sure, tell Russia to forego their multi-billion-dollar port and all of their intelligence and like just abandon this base for Western powers to come and take it. They're going to say absolutely not. So if you're looking at this totally blank slate outside, what would you think? I think obviously there's Western biases to be like, Putin's dumb. But that sounds to me like when people go, Trump is dumb. Trump's not stupid. But Trump has bankruptcies. Yeah, he's 500 plus companies and 5 bankruptcies. And bankruptcies don't mean failure. It means a restructuring to keep the business in place. The idea that Vladimir Putin has been successful in running his autocratic system for decades while people are lying to him is silly.
I don't think he's dumb. It's like saying, well, America went into Afghanistan and, you know, they thought they had all these hopes like George W. Bush that we're going to create this liberal government in Afghanistan, and the people were against it. The American government were misinformed. They had the wrong intelligence on that. I think applies.
Disagree.
The same principle applies to Putin.
I think the people were misinformed. I think the U.S. government knew exactly what they're doing with their 40-year plan in Afghanistan for nation building, and that's why they offered up contracts to all these military-industrial complex companies, and they expected to be there forever. The idea that the American people were sold will be greeted as liberators is a ridiculous joke. And so this narrative we get out of Ukraine that, wow, Putin's so dumb, why would he do such a thing? Okay, well, I don't care what the opinion is. All I'm going to do is look at the battle assessment. This fight started with Crimea. When the Euromaidan protests were taking over and it resulted in Eastern separatist movements in Ukraine, Russia immediately held a referendum to seize Crimea. Clearly, that mattered to them because they have a naval base there, and it's their access to the Bosphorus where they can ship out all of their gas. Why? Well, because the insult from the West is that Russia is a cold gas station. So what did Vladimir Putin do? When it became clear that Obama and the West were courting Ukraine for NATO and EU admittance, he began to put pressure. He began to build up troops on the western front of Russia in Ukraine, as well as securing Crimea. Trump then gets elected, and what happens? Putin stops. Why? Trump starts blowing the crap up out of ISIS, and it allows the Assad regime in Syria to stabilize to a certain degree. Trump gets out of office, and what happens? We immediately see the Assad regime start crumbling again. All the efforts that Trump made in the Middle East start being walked backwards, is a light way of putting it. Russia then begins amassing troops again. There was this period where Trump was in office from 2016, or I should say 2017 to 2021, where we did not see this escalation of conflict. ISIS was being decimated. Now, where are we? I said this last year. I feared that the Biden administration was creating a circumstance by which Trump would not be able to resolve the Ukraine war with Russia. That was the point. And that Trump was very hopeful. 2 years ago, I said if Trump was in office right now, the war would be over. Then last year, I said, you look at what's going on with the expansion and the attacks, I don't think Trump's going to be able to easily navigate this, because the military-industrial complex, the Democrat establishment, wants to create a circumstance by which Russia will not back down. Their losses will be too heavy. All that aside, let's look at the start of the war, what the motivations appeared to be. Outside of any speculation or opinion from the press, Putin clearly wanted Crimea. However, the bridge, what is it, the Kherson Bridge, was bombed. That being their only access to Crimea is a severe weakness. So what did they need? They need the land. They need the Donbass stretching down into Crimea, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, Donetsk, and that's what he has. He has it now. Why hasn't Putin tried to go back to the north? Why hasn't he tried to go back and reclaim these areas? He could move in through Belarus and he could stage a pincer strike on Kiev because he doesn't care.
I think it's because he knows that it would be very difficult for him to do that because of the original experience. And I don't think he thought that he was going to be in a long, drawn-out conflict for many years. The reason I think that is, he sends in all these troops at the beginning of the war who are unprepared, under-equipped, under-trained, and that's how the Ukrainians were able to push them out. Putin's economy, like Russia's economy, is struggling. Like, there's no doubt about that. They're having inflation problems. They're having to cut back on military spending. Perhaps over 1 million Russian young men have been killed in this war. That is a disaster for the Russian demographics. They're already struggling with a fertility crisis. Yeah. Also, look at the rate of the abortions in Russia is huge. It's like Eastern Europe and Russia has very, very high levels of abortion, and they're struggling with an elderly population, the pensions and so on. How is it in Russia's interest to go and kill all these young guys, kill all these young men for their long-term interest? And surely
to secure Sevastopol.
I think that's one aim of Putin. I suspect, we disagree on this clearly, but I think that he did originally want to come in and topple Zelensky.
I'll put it like this.
Yeah.
I think you have an opinion based on political opinions you've read. My assessment is literally just...
How would you know? Because you don't know. You're not reading Putin's sort of...
No, I'm just looking at the battle map and I'm like, Vladimir Putin has located all of his resources in the land bridge to Crimea. End of story.
But I look at the battle map and see everything else being pushed out at the beginning of the war. And I don't think that was what he wanted or in his interests.
The first territory that Putin seized was Crimea. The next territories were the eastern regions. Then he attacked. It was a flank strike from the north and the east. And he quickly, when that battle happened and they repelled from the north, he secured the land bridge to Crimea and has held it for years.
I think he's adapted. I think he's adapted very well.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah, I just don't. Well, so are you. I suspect.
You can't
read Putin's mind, can you?
No, I can't. I can just look at the battle map, and my assessment is quite literally: here's what Putin's done. I ascribe no reason other than the first place he took was Crimea, then the land bridge to Crimea. That's it. End of story. So I keep hearing from all these people about the will of Putin, what he wants to do, and how he was going to secure Kiev in 3 days. And I'm like, well, none of that is based on any real assessment. It's the opinion. First, that was the opinion of Boris Johnson that you can then argue you believe is military intelligence. We don't even know that. It was just a quote he said. Putin thought he was going to go in there in 3 days. Well, I don't know that. All I know is Putin did take Crimea. He did take the Donbass. He did secure the land bridge to Crimea. And that's what his military has secured for the past 2 years. And he's never tried any other to conquer any other parts of the country. By all means,
in the beginning,
in which case we're speculating no matter what we say. So you from that point you can argue maybe he wanted Kiev. I don't know. I can argue this: the strike on Kiev was to divert Ukrainian forces north so they could secure the land bridge, which is the only place he maintains military presence, and is how he gets access to the Black Sea so he can ship oil to foreign countries through the Bosphorus and the Suez.
Well, isn't it true historically that the Soviet strategy was lightning campaigns? And so that's why the initial offensive in the north was with limited supply, and then now they're kind of bogged down in protracted warfare, so they had to withdraw because this is not Russia, at least at the start of the war, which is not in Russia's element. So they needed to reallocate resources on building that land.
I'll just say one last thought on this because it's a very esoteric, geopolitical thing. There is no stated goal for Putin as to the rest of Ukraine. There is a stated goal as it pertains to Crimea. So if we are trying to assess the objectives of Russia right now based on what we know, this argument he's taking Ukraine has no light at the end of the tunnel.
The objective goal of the whole of Ukraine for Putin, and he does say this publicly, is Ukraine needs to demilitarize, it can't join NATO, it can't join the European Union. Those are all geostrategic goals for Putin in this war. And you could argue at the beginning of the war...
Those are the terms he said for negotiating the end of the war.
Yeah.
Not for a military purpose for invading the country.
No, I'm not saying he wants to... Well, I don't think he can invade the whole country, even if he wants to.
So the point I'm making is, when you look at the start of the war, we're trying to understand the reason why Putin attacked. It is not to demilitarize and stop Ukraine from joining NATO. He secured Crimea first thing in, 2014? Or was this 2016?
2014.
2014. Yeah. And then the eastern regions, and then the land bridge. So you can make the argument about the politics of it outside of that and all of the different opinions everybody's got. And I'm like, sure, fine, maybe. But the only resource drive that we actually see here is the Black Sea. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.